Brian always felt like he didn't quite fit in with the other boys at school. He found himself drawn to girls' clothing and accessories, but kept these feelings locked away, scared of what others might think. One day, his mother found a pink dress hidden in the back of his closet. To Brian's surprise, she didn't judge him or tell him it was wrong. Instead, she hugged him tightly and told him to always be true to himself. Although he was overjoyed at his mother's acceptance, Brian still felt scared to fully embrace his feminine side. He continued to keep it hidden, only daring to wear the dress when he was alone in his room. But as time passed, he grew more restless, wanting nothing more than to be able to express himself fully. It was his mother who eventually pushed him to take the leap. She took him out shopping, picking out a full outfit complete with a dress, shoes, and a purse. Brian was hesitant at first, but with his mother's encouragement, he tried it on. As he looked at himself in the mirror, he finally felt like he was looking at the real him. The first few days of showing his true self to the world were nerve-wracking, but as he received nothing but love and support from his family and friends, Brian knew that he had made the right decision. He was finally living his life on his own terms, and for the first time, he felt truly happy. As he navigated this new world, he knew that there would be challenges ahead. He wasn't sure how the world would treat him, but with his mother's love and support, he felt like he could face anything. The journey had only just begun, and Brian couldn't believe what had just happened. His mother had found out about his secret desire to dress as a girl, and instead of getting angry or disappointed, she had embraced him and told him to live his life how he wanted to. He was so grateful for her understanding and support, but at the same time, he was terrified of actually following through with it. One day while he was at school, he saw a group of girls walking down the hallway dressed in their school uniforms. They looked so confident and carefree, and Brian couldn't help but feel envious. He wished he could be like them, but he knew it was impossible. That evening, as he sat alone in his room, his mother came in to check on him. She saw the sadness in his eyes and asked him what was wrong. Brian couldn't hold it in any longer and began to cry, telling her about his fears and insecurities. His mother hugged him tightly, whispering words of encouragement and support. She told him that he was strong and brave, and that he deserved to be happy. She promised to help him through this no matter what. With her support, Brian slowly began to gather the courage to express himself the way he wanted. He started small, wearing a little bit of makeup and experimenting with different clothes. His mother was there every step of the way, helping him pick out outfits and giving him advice. As the days passed, Brian started to feel more and more confident in himself. He began to pay less attention to what other people thought and more to what made him happy. He started to realize that he didn't have to hide who he was and that it was okay to be himself. He was still scared, but he knew that with his mother's help, he could do this. He couldn't wait to see where this journey would take him. As the story progresses, it becomes clear that Brian's journey to self-acceptance will not be easy. He faces judgment and discrimination from his peers and society, and must navigate the complexities of coming out as transgender. But with the love and support of his mother and those closest to him, he finds the strength to be true to himself. Brian felt a mix of emotions as he got ready for school the next day. On one hand, he was excited to finally be able to express himself as he truly felt, but on the other hand, he was scared of what his classmates and teachers would think. He had always been an introverted and reserved person, and the thought of standing out made him anxious. As he walked to school that morning, he couldn't help but feel self-conscious. He kept his head down and avoided making eye contact with anyone. When he got to school, he made a beeline for his locker, hoping to avoid any interactions. But as soon as he opened his locker, a group of his classmates came over to talk to him. "Hey, Brian, you look different today. Did you do something with your hair?" one of them asked. Brian couldn't help but feel his heart race as he replied, "Yeah, I decided to try something new." His classmates looked at him curiously but didn't pry any further. Brian was relieved that they didn't seem to suspect anything. Throughout the day, Brian couldn't help but notice the looks he was getting from his classmates and teachers. Some of them looked confused, while others looked curious, but no one said anything to him directly. As he walked home that day, Brian couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. He had taken the first step in expressing himself, and it hadn't been as bad as he had imagined. As the days went by, Brian gradually became more comfortable expressing himself as a girl. He started experimenting with different styles and colors of clothing, and even started wearing makeup. His classmates and teachers slowly got used to his new look and eventually stopped staring. Brian also started to become more confident in himself. He stopped being so introverted and started making more friends. He even started to enjoy being the center of attention. He was finally able to be true to himself, and it felt liberating. But as Brian's confidence grew, so did his curiosity. He started to wonder what it would be like to fully transition into a girl. He knew it would be a long and difficult journey, but he felt like he was ready for it. Brian's mother noticed the changes in her son and knew that he was struggling with something. She could see the conflict in his eyes and knew that he needed to talk to someone. She suggested that he see a therapist, and he agreed. The therapist helped Brian to understand and accept his feelings. She also helped him to explore the different options available to him. Brian decided that he wanted to start hormone replacement therapy, and with the support of his therapist and his mother, he began the process of transitioning into a girl. Brian felt like a weight had been lifted off of his shoulders. He finally felt like he was living his true self, and it was the most liberating feeling in the world. He was finally able to be who he truly was, and it felt amazing. Brian had been living as a girl for a few weeks now, and it was both liberating and terrifying. He loved being able to express himself in a way that felt true to himself, but he was also constantly worried about being found out. He was paranoid that someone would figure out that he was transgender and that they would judge or bully him. Despite these fears, Brian was determined to live his life as a girl. He loved the way he looked and felt, and he was determined to make it work. One day, while he was out shopping, he saw a flyer for a support group for transgender people. He was hesitant to go at first, but he eventually decided to give it a try. The group was made up of people just like him who were all going through the same struggles. They talked about their fears and their struggles, and Brian finally felt like he wasn't alone. He realized that he wasn't the only one going through this, and that it was normal to feel scared and lost. With the support of the group, Brian started to feel more confident in himself. He stopped worrying so much about what other people thought of him, and he began to truly embrace his identity as a girl. He was finally happy, and he was proud of who he was. As the weeks and months passed, Brian continued to grow and change. He made new friends, and he even started dating a boy who was accepting and supportive of him. He was happier than he had ever been, and he knew that he had made the right decision in transitioning. Despite the struggles he had faced, Brian was grateful for the journey he had been on. He had learned so much about himself and about the world, and he was excited to see what the future held for him. He knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but he was ready to face them head-on. As the story comes to an end, there are still some loose threads. Brian's father had not been seen or heard from since Brian came out as transgender. His old schoolmates who had bullied him before had not been seen or heard from either. Despite this, Brian was happy and content with his life, and he was not looking back. He was looking forward to what the future held for him. Brian's mother had arranged for him to meet with a therapist who specialized in gender identity issues, Dr. Harris. Brian was hesitant at first, but his mother was insistent that he needed someone to talk to about his feelings. In their first session, Brian found it easy to open up to Dr. Harris. He told her about his struggles with wanting to express himself as a girl, but feeling too scared and ashamed to do so. He also shared his fear of rejection and discrimination from his family, friends, and society. Dr. Harris listened attentively and assured Brian that he was not alone in his feelings, and that there was nothing wrong with wanting to express oneself in a way that feels true to oneself. Over the next few weeks, Brian and Dr. Harris worked together to explore his feelings and build his confidence. They talked about the different ways he could express himself and the different resources and support groups available to him. Dr. Harris also helped Brian understand that his feelings were not something that he needed to be ashamed of, and that it was important for him to be true to himself. Brian's mother was also an important part of his therapy, and she worked closely with Dr. Harris to support him. Together, they came up with a plan for Brian to start expressing himself as a girl in a safe and controlled environment. It was a slow process, but with the support of his mother and Dr. Harris, Brian started to feel more confident in himself. He began to experiment with different clothing and makeup and started to present as a girl in certain safe spaces. As he grew more comfortable with himself, Brian started to come out to his friends and family. It was not easy, and there were some who struggled to understand, but for the most part, the people in Brian's life were supportive and accepting. In the end, Brian's journey was not without its challenges, but with the love and support of his family, friends, and therapist, he was able to find the courage to express himself as the person he truly was. He was finally able to live his life as the girl he had always felt he was inside. As Brian looked in the mirror, he smiled at the reflection staring back at him. He knew that this was only the beginning of his journey, but he felt more alive and true to himself than ever before. He was ready to face the world as the person he truly was, and he knew that no matter what, he would always have the love and support of the people who mattered most to him.